All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And as you can see in the title, um, you should be paying attention to this, okay? And this is based on an article that I came across from rtnews.com. And as you can see in the headline of this article, it says Italy urges EU, which is the European Union, to push back against the US. And the reason that I said you should be paying attention to this is because for those, for example, that are without, when I say without, I'm referring to those that are not in the knowledge, that don't know these prophecies. To them, it's just this is something that they would just glance past. But they fail to realize that the reason this is important to pay attention to is because it's all related to prophecy, right? We know that, which what we're going to go through in Revelation, the 17th chapter, that we know that at some point the European Union and members of the EU and NATO, which are the supposed allies right now of the US, are going to eventually flip. They're going to turn and become enemies of the US, so much so that they're actually going to be a part of the nations that shoot their nuclear weapons onto the US, adding to the destruction of this place. And the more we see articles like this, the more we know that we're closer to that point. So this is also an important factor in prophecy, which is why you should be paying attention to it as well. Because you have things that take place internally, but then you also have things that take place geopolitically, right? And you have to pay attention to them all because they're all, factoring in to fulfill prophecy at the end of the day. And as the scriptures say, we have to stand upon our watch. All right, whether the things that are nearer and the things that are far, the things that are on your right and on your left, you have to watch them all. So I'm going to read a little bit of this, and then we'll go into this prophecy. Now, I was also watching a video that was done by Elder Apostle Tahar earlier this morning, and I believe it was titled "Understanding Daniel 8 and 25" and other topics. I think that the title was similar to that. But one thing he mentioned in there was that he mentioned that ultimately when we do these videos he said now in 2022, when we do these videos, we don't necessarily do it for ourselves. All right, we don't necessarily do it for elders or brothers that are seasoned or that have been in the truth for a while, but more so for those that are newly come in. That's why you'll see um, most of the videos we do now is pretty, most of them are pretty short. Sometimes they go a little longer, but they get straight to the point because we don't go into every single detail that those have already been covered. But when he mentioned that, it stayed in my head, which is important. Now, of course, when we do these lessons, we all get edified. Obviously, if there's like breaking news or if there's an article or there's some information that comes out, we all still watch, we all still learn, we all still get edified. But we have to keep in mind that majority, if not all of this information concerning these prophecies, we already know, right? So we also have to keep that in mind when we do these lessons, that there are people coming in now that don't know. So there may be certain points that either they may ask a question about, or the way we phrase it, we speak in the know, but some of them are not in the know just yet. They're now starting to get in the know. So we always have to keep that in mind as well, that you always have newcomers that are watching, and they may not be up to speed just yet. Um, and that's pretty much the point, right? That's what the Lord said, to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So if they're lost, through the Spirit, we just gotta, we gotta push out the word. But the scriptures say using words easy to be understood, right? Even the Apostle Paul mentioned that. All right, speaking to the in his letter to the Corinthians, he said, "I didn't come unto you with wisdom of words or all this extravagant speech." I just kept it plain and simple so that you would get the main message of it, which is Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. So it says here, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says the bloc must protect key industries as Washington undermines economic competitiveness. And also, we have to keep in mind Proverbs 21:1, which says that the hand, I believe it says the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, and as rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Roughly paraphrasing it, but in essence, the king's heart, the word heart in the Hebrew goes, or it's lab, which means your mind. So what it's saying is the mind of these kings, which when it says kings is referring to the leaders and the rulers of these, different regions, countries, and places. Their thoughts, their mindset, it's in the hand or the control or the power of the Lord. And he controls it however he wants it to go via his holy angels. And you can read an example of that in Daniel, the 10th chapter. So the angels work on the minds of these rulers and of these politicians and even of these elites to get them to make certain decisions that will lead to certain events that will lead to the fulfillment of prophecy. So just like I believe it's Ezekiel 38 or 39, there's a verse in there around the 9th verse or so. It says that that the Lord is going to put an evil thought into the mind of Gog and Magog, which is Russia today. And that's what, because the Lord is ultimately controlling their thoughts. And in the Apocrypha, it tells you that as the way of the judge or the ruler is, so are the way so are the ways of the people. Okay. So going on, it says Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has called for the European Union to become more economically independent in the wake of a new U.S. law that puts the bloc's manufacturers at a competitive disadvantage, Bloomberg reported on Thursday. So you may think, oh, well, how are they going to turn on each other? They're allies. They're part of a union or a body or whatever. Yeah, but the Most High can put it into their mind for one U.S. to go and make a very selfish decision, and then he can put it into the mind of their so-called allies to just say, look, we're done with this. So anything could really happen at any moment. She says, speaking at her year-end press briefing in Rome, interesting, right? Meloni urged the EU to build its own supply chains for key industries in response to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, a $360 billion spending bill that President Joe Biden signed into law in August, according to the media outlet. The bloc also must revise its rules on state aid to manufacturers and strengthen oversight of supply chains for such industries as computer CHIPs, car makers, and alternative energy, Meloni reportedly said. All right. And let me see. Provide a spending bill. Yeah, and then I guess it goes into a little bit more of the actually, let's read this part down here a bit. And I've also linked this article in the description box so you can access it, at any time. So it says Meloni has urged that the IRA discriminates, Slovakia has argued that the IRA discriminates against European companies. But now you would think about it, right? Well, why would the U.S. put out a bill like that and not consider these European companies if they're all allies? Italian economic minister Giancarlo Giorgetti warned earlier this month that some companies are already considering moving factories to the U.S., which would be a quote-unquote disaster. And then it goes on, like I said, into more of these details here. All right. So yeah, I mean, with that being said, the overall message of this article is this is the sentiment that's starting to rise, and this also links with in some way, shape, or form, it still links with Daniel. I believe it's 2, the 2nd chapter, and somewhere around the 40th verse on down, when Daniel basically goes into the I believe it was a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. All right, where it was a statue, and he was basically breaking it down, and in there he deals with the statue, which represents the different empires that would rule in succession of each other, and eventually he gets to the feet or the toes, which deals with this time. All right, where you have NATO and the EU, but it deals with the breaking up, right? Part being iron, part being clay, but it goes into how part of it was broken. It will be partly broken, which is why you have this, these cracks and divisions that are forming, all right, within the EU. You had Brexit, which was the British exit, all right, and you're going to have more divisions within that because it's all part of prophecy. But they will hold it together just enough to fulfill prophecy. And when the Lord deems it time and ready, it'll all, like Apostle Hart says, it'll move lightning fast because the necessary prerequisites have been fulfilled. So now all that's left is to just completely crash it. So moving on to the book of Revelation, the 17th chapter, and this is a prophecy that deals with, as you can see, the doom of Babylon, which Babylon in prophecy is America. Okay, modern day America is known biblically as, sometimes you'll see it as the daughter of Babylon, sometimes you'll see it as Babylon. But you also have to be careful because sometimes you'll hear Babylon and it's actually referring to ancient Babylon. But in more cases than none, it'll be referring to the prophetic Babylon, which is America. And really, all you have to do is read the context around it. So this is the book of Revelation, chapter 17, verse 1. It says, "And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me." Now, at this point, you have the Apostle John, he's still on the island, all right, of Patmos, where he was banished. And that's where the Lord gave him these visions and revelations. It says, saying unto me, "Come hither, I will shew thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters," which the great whore is who? America. It says, "with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication." Now, the kings of the earth, like I mentioned before, it goes into the rulers of these different countries and these different nations. So you have some that are known as kings, some that are known as prime ministers, some that are known as presidents. All right. But a king is really a ruler of of people. And in this case, I just gave some example of titles that they go by today. But as it says, they have committed fornication. So that obviously it's not literal, it's metaphorically speaking. But ways that they've committed fornication is by intermingling, with the ways of America. All right, whether it's through adopting some of these policies or conforming their ways in order to better form certain trade deals or agreements and treaties, because when these nations, as they say, get in bed, right? They'll say like this nation is in bed with this other nation. Obviously, it's not literal, but when they get in bed with America, they have to now basically do what America says. They have to adopt those ways. That's a part of that metaphorical fornication on a geopolitical business level. And that's why you'll see, in essence, a lot of these nations that really deal with America, to an extent, they have to become some form of an extension of America. So this whore has spread her ideology, her ways, her tentacles throughout these other nations. And as it says, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication, which wine is also a term used to, obviously you have literal wine, but it can also represent philosophies, doctrines, ways. And going back to the scripture I mentioned earlier, which says that basically the way a judge or a ruler of the people is, so will the people be. So if the kings are committing fornication, obviously then they'll start adopting certain policies and certain ways, pushing certain ideologies on the people that they're ruling over, and eventually those inhabitants are also going to be affected, all right, and made drunk with that, all right. But obviously it's not going to be everybody. So it says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." And that woman represents Babylon, today known as America, and that scarlet colored beast represents this power structure that they have. All right, or in essence, Esau's power structure, which is known collectively as NATO and the EU. Okay. Now, having 7 heads and 10 horns, those 7 heads, if you break them down collectively, they're Edomite power structure. But when you break them down, they go into like different. You can call them different regions, different rulerships, kingdoms, empires, strongholds, whatever you want to call them. All right, but it's the same seven heads that were in existence at the time of the Roman Empire, and they are still here today. All right. Some just have slightly modified names, but it's still the same people in the same power. And in the ancient world, you had the Greeks, which were one of the heads, and then you had the Romans, and in the ancient name, you had Hispania. Then you had the Gauls, you had Germania Major, Germania Minor, and Britannia. Those are the ancient names. Today, instead of Hispania, you'll hear Spanish. Instead of Gauls, you hear French. Instead of, Germania Major and Minor necessarily, you just hear Germany. And then instead of Britannia, you hear Britain or the UK or whatnot. Okay. But it's still the same people, just different names, slightly different names. And the 10 horns is in essence is still the same power structure, but you have more on a micro level. Okay, so like in the ancient world, you had the Vandals, Alemanni, the Lombards, Heruli, the Anglo-Saxons, the Visigoths, the what's that? The Suebi, Ostrogoths, Burgundians, Franks. Those are all the ancient names, which in today's terms you'll have instead of Franks, you hear the French. Instead of the Anglo-Saxons, you hear the UK or Britain and so on and so forth. Okay, but the 10 horns today represent the original European Union, okay, or the EU, which when you looked at the flag, you had, I believe it was either 10 or 12, but when you look at the 12 stars on there, they really add up to 10 because you had Spain and Britain that were a part of Slovakia, Spain and Portugal that are part of that EU or those 12 flags, but really they're one. All right, Portugal is really a part of Spain. Same with I think it was Ireland and the UK, which is really together at one. All right, and obviously I don't remember every single one of the countries of the EU, but if you look it up, I'm sure you'll find it. Luxembourg, Italy, Germany, Belgium, so on and so forth. All right, Greece, all of that good stuff. Okay, but in a nutshell, this the seven heads and the 10 horns collectively is Esau's power structure. Today, you have pretty much NATO and the EU. Verse 4 says, "And the woman was arrayed in purple." Now, as we read, you'll understand why this woman was sitting upon the scarlet colored beast. Okay, because when you look at NATO, you look at the EU, at the end of the day, they're all different countries collectively working together to form this power structure, but you can still see who the head is, right? Who is really controlling the direction which this beast goes. And that's America. That's why she is the woman that sits upon the scarlet colored beast, right? Just like in the ancient world, you had Rome. Remember, the Roman Empire had Rome in it, with Rome itself in it, but it also had the neighboring regions that combined together to make it an empire. So it's the same thing now. All right, verse 4 says, "And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, which represents royalty, because when you go into that purple, really dealing it's a I think it's a Tyrian purple, okay, which comes from I forgot the name of the exact animals, but they're shelled animals, kind of like snails, like a special kind of snail that is found on the coast of, I think, Tyre and Zidon, around there. And those, when you smash the shells of those snails, we'll just call them, they excrete this purplish kind of dye. But you need to smash a whole lot of them in order to get just a small amount of that dye. And so it was very expensive. If obviously they would take the dye, they would use it to make garments and clothes and so on and so forth, but it was so expensive because of how difficult it was to get that. And that's why you would mainly have really people that are in royal positions, high positions, that could really afford those kinds. That's why you'll hear purple being associated with like royalty and so on and so forth, right? And scarlet colored. And when you read in the book of Daniel, the 5th chapter, you notice that Belshazzar said, yeah, I don't know who this guy is, but you gotta go. All right, you'll hear in Daniel the fifth chapter, Belshazzar, he said that if anybody could break down that writing, could interpret it, he would be clothed in I believe he said scarlet, and have a gold chain about his neck. All right, which is really that purplish red uh um color. So it wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna just throw a regular garment on you. It says, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And that golden cup that's in her hand, it's metaphorical, okay? Because that cup, when you think of a cup, I mean, when you think of a cup, you think of something being in the cup. Somebody's holding the cup. You're thinking, okay, well, they clearly got something. More than likely, it's liquid, and they drinking it. All right. So a cup is associated with drinking, is also associated with holding or containing things. So in this case, that cup was holding what? Full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So the wicked ways and ideologies and philosophies that she was using to go around and spread it and cause these other nations to drink. When you read what's that, Jeremiah, I think it's 50 or 51, it talks about how she has been a golden cup in the hand of the Lord, and the Lord has used it to make the the inhabitants of the earth, roughly paraphrasing, drunken. All right. So that golden cup in her hand represents, as it says, the abominations and the filthiness that she used to intermingle with these other kings and these other nations in order to spread those that cancer, put it like that. And that's why today you see other countries that, oh, as a matter of fact, in Second Esdras, the 15th chapter, getting to the last few verses, it starts to go in on Moab or Asia. Why? Because it says that Asia was trying to be like America or like Babylon. Therefore, Asia was also going to get that judgment, get that work. So that's what happens. If you go to these other countries, you'll see on their news stations, they report about things that go on here. But rarely or seldom, unless something major is going on in another country, do you hear America focused on what's going on, reporting everything happening in these other nations. Okay, so it says here, verse 5, and on her forehead or upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Which I believe in the Hebrew, this breaks down. If you break it down right and calculate it, it adds up to 666 when you look at the Hebrew characters and their numeric values. Now I don't remember the exact breakdown for that off the top, but I believe one of the apostles broke it down, in the past, and they did a video on it. If I could find it, I may post it. We'll see how the spirit goes. But as it says in verse 6, it says, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints. Who are the saints? The saints are Israelites. And with the blood of the martyrs of Yahushai. And because you're going to have, those that are going to be martyred for the Lord. All right. It says, and when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Because remember, the water, the what John is seeing here is what he is describing. The, John, when he says, "Oh, I saw a woman. She was dressed in this. She was wearing this. She looked like this," he actually saw a woman. When he said, "I saw a beast," he actually saw a beast. And there are certain times when the Lord showed him cities and things that were going on there, but sometimes he would actually see these things that he's describing. And in today's day and age, when we read it, Barakatha Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, starting with our elders and apostles on down, he gave us the understanding to be able to interpret, okay, well, the woman represents boom. The beast that she's sitting on represents boom. Because John didn't see a city and then call it a beast. And then he didn't see a country and then call it a woman. He's describing what he saw. So if he saw, if for those verses where he describes the woman that he saw, if he was actually seeing a city, he would have said, well, I saw a city and the buildings were this and the buildings were that. Where would he get the woman from? Okay, so there are certain parts where he actually saw these things that he described, but they represent other things. So as it says here, and I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell, because the angel knew, obviously who and what Babylon is about, all that stuff. John didn't know that. He's living 2,000 years ago. He's on an island. He's seeing all of these visions, and he's, damn, who's that? What's going on there, right? So he doesn't know. He hasn't necessarily, obviously, in this time, in this day and age, we're like, I mean, we wouldn't, if we know what America is about. We've seen what the ways that she pushes and all of these things. But at the time, he's seeing the vision. He's like, all right, I'm writing down what I'm seeing. He's not necessarily understanding everything that he's seeing. And that happened with a lot of the prophets of old. That's why sometimes they'll ask, oh, what are these? Or what's going on here? Or the angel might ask them a question and they'll say, well, I don't know, But in this day and age, the Lord blessed us with the understanding of that. So now we know. Verse 7, and the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. And the beast that thou saw, so like it says, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. And this is, it says, and go into perdition. And this is broken down in the 11th verse as well. All right, but this beast is dealing with America, because America today in the ancient world was Rome. All right, America you can think of as the reincarnation of the ancient Rome, just coming back. And you can see it in the way that this place is set up, from the way their buildings are designed to the things that they have adapted from the ancient world, particularly Rome. Okay, the theaters, the amphitheaters, the language Latin. You ever wonder why the Roman numerals? Okay, some of these certain laws. As a matter of fact, I believe, what was it? I think it was NATO, which was formed by something called the Treaty of Rome. A treaty of. Okay, it was the EEC, Slovakia, the European Economic Commission, which later became I believe, the European Union. But as it says, the Treaty of Rome, or EEC Treaty, brought about the creation of the European Economic Community, the best known of the European communities. The treaty was signed on March 25th, 1957, and then it lists the countries that first signed it. Okay, which is just, I mean, one example. Nevertheless, there's so many different things that you can find that resemble Rome here today, because this place is the reincarnation of the Roman Empire, and it has the same Roman Caesars coming back today as different presidents doing the same thing, and it has the prophets coming back today. Just like Rome was the center of attraction in the ancient world, guess what? It's back again today under a different name. So it says the beast that thou sawest was, because it was in power, it was in existence at that time, and is not, because it went down, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So this part alone happened over a good period of time. This wasn't like a back to back to back instance kind of thing. It happened over hundreds of years, right? Where the Roman Empire was, then it fell, and then it came back again. But as it says, it shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Now you may say, well, America didn't ascend out of Europe, because the bottomless pit is Europe. But technically it kind of did, because where did America come from? The 13 colonies, which came from where? Britain. And where did Britain come from? Europe. Okay. It says, and go into perdition, which is destruction. So what's ultimately going to happen to this place? According to various precepts, Isaiah 34, Jeremiah 50, Jeremiah 51, Isaiah 13, Revelation 18, Revelation 19, and various other scriptures, this place is going to be destroyed. That's perdition, destruction. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. So in essence, those that are not of the elect, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. And the reason it says it like that is because it was, then it went down, then it came back. Right? So in essence, like, you could think of this place as the second leg of Rome. That's why if you notice the when you deal with the statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it starts with the when it gets to the legs, all right, and it deals with the iron, it flows into the feet, right? It doesn't necessarily change metals. It goes from iron and stays as iron, but in the feet are iron, part clay, because it's really still, the same part of the same power structure, just different time periods. All right. So it says, verse 9, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The seven heads are seven mountains, which represent governments. It says, okay, sometimes you read the scriptures and you'll come across the word mountain, and it may be, sometimes it may be literal, but other times it may be referring, or metaphorical, referring to governments. Okay. So it says the seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman sitteth, right? So the seven governments, regions, rulerships, okay, that the woman sitteth, meaning she is above them. And in what's that, in Daniel, it tells you that what, his look was more stout than his fellows, and that's that pride, that pomp of America, in comparison to those that are supposed to really be allies, but really she's kind of ruling over them. It says, and there are seven kings, five are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. Now, don't get tripped up because you see that it says kings. You say, wait, but you said governments, and then it said mountains, but it says kings. So you may hear kings, and then you start to think of individuals. You start to think of actual people. It's not talking about Cain. It's not talking about Nimrod. Ain't no none of that. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Kings is still referring to the rulerships or kingdoms or people or governments, however you want to phrase it. And I'll give you an example. And you go to, because these seven is still referring to the same seven that I mentioned in the beginning. All right, the Greeks, Rome, the Spanish, the French, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and Britain. Now, when you read in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, and we know that when you start off, we start dealing with the different beasts that Daniel saw in his vision, and we know that these beasts represent different empires, right? So going down, when you read dealing with these different empires, when you actually come down to, I believe it's around the let's see, 17th verse. There we go. Right. So if you read Daniel 7 and 17, you see it says here the angel is basically giving Daniel the understanding of the vision. But as he says, these great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But we understand that they're not actually kings as in individuals, because we already understand that these represent different empires. Okay, so when it says kings, it's still referring to the collectively the empire, or the power structure, for lack of a better word. All right. So now going back to Daniel Oslakia, Revelation 17. So it says, verse 10, and there are seven kings, five are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. So the seven, as I just listed, the Greeks, Rome, Spain or the Spanish, the French, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and Britain. Now, at the time that the Apostle John was receiving this vision, it says five are fallen. So the Greeks, the Spanish or Hispania, the French, Germania Major, and Germania Minor, that makes five, right? It says, and one is, which is what? Rome. Because at the time that John was there, Rome was still there. Because I believe John was banished during the reign of Domitian Caesar. And he was the last of the 12 Caesars, the 12 feathers you read in 2nd Esdras 11 and 12. Okay. So at the time, Rome was still there. So that one that is Rome, and the one that is not yet come is Britain. It says here, and when he cometh, which is the one that is not yet come, Britain, or Britannia, or the British, he must continue a short space. So eventually they came up into power and they ruled for a certain period of time. Verse 11, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seventh, and goeth into perdition. So this is why I said that what's that, verse 8 gets really broken down in verse 11, because the beast that was and is not is America. Now in the past it was Rome, and then it wasn't because it went down. When it says it's not, it means it went down. Even he is the eighth. So out of the seven that I just listed, you have an eighth, and as it says, and is of the seventh, meaning the eighth comes from the seventh. All right, and goeth into perdition. And this also happened once again over a long period of time, because the seventh was the one that came after. We just read in verse 10, right? It says, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space, which was Britain. And they ruled for a while, but then from Britain came what? The 13 colonies, which led to America. And that is the eighth, which is of the seventh, meaning it came from the seventh. There's actually a precept that mentions how it says, the thy mother which bare thee shall be ashamed of thee, roughly paraphrasing, just going into how the British really look at America. Okay, so that eighth is America, or Babylon, which is of the seventh, meaning it came from Britain, and goeth into perdition, because that's going to be the ultimate end goal of America. They're going to be, or it's going to be destroyed. And there's various precepts on that. And I'm getting to the point that's going to tie into the article at the end of the day. All right, but it says here, verse 12, and so really, there's no, if you actually understand the scriptures, there's no way that you can look at the Bible and say that this book is what, fairy tales, or it's made up, or whatever. It has a lot of historical content, and it follows a timeline. If you understand it, it follows a timeline that leads up to the time we are currently living in, and then tells us what's going to happen after. So this is a very accurate book, and this is how we're able to understand, obviously through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, we're able to understand what the future events are going to be. So it goes on, verse 12, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which once again, dealing with the word kings, is not just referring to one individual, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So the 10 kings today, we call them the EU. Now there's a lot more countries now, but they were originally 10, right? So the EU today, they don't necessarily rule by themselves, right? So they don't have like in their own individual kingdoms, but the way that they have power or authority or rulership is together collectively, right? So, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So the way that these countries have that power is by ruling collectively and forming this beast system. Okay, and when you go into the 1 hour, if you actually do the math, if I'm not mistaken, I think it comes out to about like 46 or somewhat years, somewhere along those lines. If you use Second Peter, I think it's the 3rd chapter, dealing with one day being 1,000 years with the Lord, and vice versa. But when you go into it, don't get confused, because you'll say, oh wait, but 1 hour, if you calculate it that way, comes to about like 40-something years. But then you'll say that way, but the EU has been here longer than that. But then that's when you have to understand that there's times when the Most High doesn't deal with exact time. He'll give you a range. He'll give you a time period. Or as a matter of fact, here's a good example. Let's see, the days of man. See if I can find that. So yeah, there's sometimes when the Most High. No, it's in the 4 score. There's times when the Most High deals exactly with time, with an exact time, and there's times when he gives you a time frame. Right? If you deal with the book of Daniel, the 9th chapter, when the prophecy in the 70 weeks, that is not an exact time frame, but it's roughly around that time of 400 to 500 years. I'm looking for a precept here in the book of Psalms. I'm hoping I can find it. Yeah, there it is. Psalms 90 and 10. So it says here, the days of our years are 60 years and 10. Now a score is 20, and 60 is 3 times 20, which is 60, and is another way of saying addition. So you have 60 plus 10, which is 70. So Psalms 90 and 10 says the days of our years are 70 years. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years, which is 80 years, right? 4 times 20. So it's saying that the average lifespan is 70 years, but if by reason of strength, the Lord grants you mercy, you can make it to 80. It says, yet is there strength and labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away, meaning we die. But now, this, it says 70 to 80, right? So how come you still have people that live past 80? Some people live to 80 something, like 90 something, 87, 82, because it is not an exact time. Okay, it's right around that range, but it's not an exact time. And there's times when you read it, the Lord will give you a certain time frame, which is exact, right? And then there's times like I believe the vision that the Lord gave Abraham about delivering us from Egypt. If you read in was it Exodus when we got out, I believe it actually tells you that the exact length of time the Lord said we would be there, He delivered us right on time. But then there's other times when it's around that time frame. So pretty much anywhere from however long this hour is and later, anytime within then, the Most High can decide to just, all right, time is up. We don't know obviously the exact day that is going to happen, but that's why we have signs to watch. Okay, so coming back to Revelation 17, verse 13, it says, "These have one mind." Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, remember. Yeah. So it says here, "These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." Right, one mind meaning that they're on one accord. They have to work together in order to, as it says, give their and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So they rule collectively. Verse 14, "These shall make war with the Lamb." Who is the Lamb? Yahushai. "And the Lamb shall overcome them." So when the Lord comes back, they're going to join together and they're going to come and fight against the Lord. And you can also read about that in Revelation, the 19th chapter. "For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings." Yeah. And they that are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Okay. "And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." Yeah, and that's also another thing. As you read some of these chapters, these visions, the angel themselves actually explain to whoever it is, whether it's Daniel or Ezra or John or whoever's getting it, getting the vision, what it means. So they'll give them some part at least of the breakdown of what the vision they got was, because they had no idea. They will imagine being Daniel in the time of the, I don't know, the Babylonian Empire, or the time when the Medes took over, or the Persians took over, and you're getting visions about a he goat with a horn in between his eyes, and a ram with two horns, one higher than the other, and this one is running into another, and what the hell is this? You getting this vision about a eagle, with different feathers and talons and all of these, and you like, this is intense, but what is this? How what how can I possibly? Because imagine if you didn't know the breakdown and you went and you read it. You see how confused you would be when, if you first read a breakdown of a vision that a prophet got, and you don't know the breakdown of it. You just read the verse. You would be confused. It was and it wasn't, and it came out the bottomless pit, and then it went into perdition. But the beast had what, iron teeth, and it was doing what? You'd be confused. So imagine actually receiving the vision. How much more confused would you have been? Okay. So it only makes sense that there are times when the angels would actually give the explanation or the understanding of it. Revelation 17 and 15, it says, "And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." All right, it represents people. Okay. "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast." Now here's the part that ties back into this article. So we've read about the horns and yada yada, but now we've gotten to the point where we're dealing with prophecy. So the 10 horns, all right, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. Now we know the whore is America, and the horns are her allies. But here it says that they shall, meaning in the future, these allies, these so-called allies, are going to hate America. And they're going to what? They're not just going to hate her and stop there. It says, and shall make her desolate and naked, and eat her flesh with fire and burn her, Salakia, and eat her flesh and burn her with fire, which is not literal, but it's representing they're going to destroy this place or partake in the destruction of this place. So how are they going to burn America with fire? Are the prime ministers of the different European countries going to grab matches and they're going to get on a boat and come to the coast of America and just start lighting matches and then just throw it on the sand, throw it on the borders and try to set this place on fire? No, they're going to burn it with fire through their nuclear missiles. Okay. So when you see articles like this, where you start to see them, that alliance start to weaken, you start to see the cracks forming within that alliance, you start to see them starting to shift further from each other, you know that it will not stop here. As a matter of fact, it's going to go to the point where it's going to turn into pure hate, as it's prophesied here. And then that hate is going to lead to what? War. It's going to lead to them turning on them. So we know that at some point during this Third World War, at some point when this war pops off, you can expect to see that these allies, the EU, members of NATO, they're going to turn. Whatever the exact thing, time, and reason it's going to be, we have to watch and see. But we know what the end goal will be. All right. Verse 17, it says, for God hath put it in their hearts, right, their minds, to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Do you hear that? Until the words of God shall be fulfilled. So the reason they're working together and they're keeping it together and there's cracks, but they're still holding on, is because the Lord needs to keep them together to fulfill certain prophecies. You have the MOTB, right, which stands for the MARK of the beast. But if there's no beast, then where's you know what I mean? You got to have the beast. You got to have that system in place. So the Lord has them working together for certain things to come to pass. But once he has accomplished all of those things, then next phase begins. That's why the destruction is going to come after the MOTB, the hour of temptation, and all of those things happen. And that's why the Lord has a order of prophecy. So things don't just happen out of place. If right now Russia said we're tomorrow at 3 p.m. we're shooting all our nuclear missiles that are gonna land on America, and this place by tomorrow 6 p.m. is going to be non-existent. It doesn't matter how serious they look. It doesn't matter if they have arrayed all their missiles towards America. It doesn't matter if they've done all of that. We know that that's not what's going to happen. How do we know that? Because Revelation 13, 16, 17 has not come to fully pass yet. So those missiles and America's destruction won't happen until that point. That's also a part of wisdom and knowledge keeping you stable in these times, because you understand what needs to happen before what and how it needs to happen. So lastly, verse 18, it says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth, which that great city is America or Babylon. All right, that's pretty much Revelation, the 17th chapter. But, tying back into the point of this article, as you can see, Italy urges EU to push back against US, and they're gonna have these little skirmishes here and there, but understand that according to prophecy, it's going to escalate to the point of hate, and then it's going to turn into ultimately them shooting their missiles on this place and destroying it as well. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much it on that. I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha, Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.